The city of Dust Fall was never meant to be inhabited by the living. Every brick, every iron post, every fog-soaked alleyway held the weight of centuries of whispers, rituals, and the quiet shivering of something that did not sleep beneath the cobblestones. The moon was a thin sliver tonight, barely able to pierce the smog that rose from the rusted chimneys and coal furnaces. The lamplighters had finished their rounds, but their flames flickered as though frightened of what lurked beyond the edge of luminance. And in a crooked attic, atop a leaning townhouse on Wraithbone Street, sat a young man hunched over an ink-stained desk. His name, though not many in the city knew it, was Quill Hemlock. His candle burned low, its flame trembling as though something were breathing over it. His fingers, long and pale, clutched a fountain pen that looked older than the city itself. Its surface was engraved with symbols that shifted when one wasn't looking directly at them, symbols that scholars, priests, and madmen alike would have torn their eyes out before attempting to decipher. Quill dipped the pen into a bottle of black ink so thick it absorbed the candlelight instead of reflecting it. He wrote. He always wrote, even when he did not want to. The attic creaked around him, the wooden beams sagging like ribs in the belly of a starved beast. The wind moaned through the gaps in the tiles. Outside, church bells tolled midnight, not that the churches here had any congregants anymore. Faith had rotted in Dust Fall generations ago. But stories? Stories remained. Quill's breath trembled as the words spilled onto the yellowed page, his handwriting elegant yet frantic. The dead girl stood at the corner of the room, her eyes sewn shut with silver thread, yet she saw everything. He paused, not because he was uncertain, but because he heard the floorboards behind him creak. Slowly, deliberately, he didn't turn. He had learned not to turn. Not after the first time, when he had written of a man with a jaw unhinged like a serpent, only to hear wet breathing behind him until dawn. He swallowed and continued writing. Her voice was a whisper without sound, a memory of a scream. Another creak. Another inch closer. Quill squeezed his eyes shut. It isn't real, he told himself. But the lie didn't hold, because Quill's stories always became real. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. When Quill wrote, the world changed. And lately, the world changed faster than he could control. He dipped the pen again, though he didn't remember lifting it. His mind pulsed with pressure, like something ancient and patient pressed its forehead against his, guiding his hand. He wrote, She spoke my name. The air behind him grew cold. Frost feathered across the surface of his ink bottle. The candle hissed as ice crystals formed along the wick. Then, in the silence between heartbeats, a voice like thread snapping whispered, Quill! He gasped and jerked around. The corner was empty. The attic remained still. Except, the page he had just written on was warm to the touch. Quill stared at the ink, still wet, still glistening. But it wasn't ink anymore. It was blood. He stumbled back, chair legs screeching against the floor. His breath came fast, fogging the air. His pulse thudded like a drum summoning spirits. He squeezed his eyes shut, steadying himself. This was happening more often now. His writing no longer waited to manifest. It bled immediately into existence. He backed away from the desk, but the pen twitched. It rolled. It turned upright. And then it stood, balanced, defying gravity. Quill froze. The pen leaned toward him, almost bowing, as though greeting its master. Then a whisper, not from behind him, not from the room, but from inside his skull, spoke. Right. Quill shook his head. No, not tonight. The whisper tightened, like claws around his thoughts. Right. He stepped back, fumbling for the attic door. I won't. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed him whole. And in the dark, the whisper became a chorus, layered voices, old voices, voices older than language. We chose you. You will write. Quill's back hit the wall. His hands trembled. His voice shook. Why me? Silence. Then, Because you are the only one who still believes. A spark flared. The candle relit itself, only now the flame was black, shimmering like oil. The shadows it cast were wrong, bending in directions light should not bend. The pen rose from the desk, floating, suspended by unseen strings. It drifted toward him. Slowly, purposefully. Quill turned to flee, but the attic door was gone. Not closed. Gone. The wall was seamless where it should have been. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs. He spun back around, chest tight with panic, just as the pen pressed itself into his hand. His fingers curled unwillingly around it, knuckles whitening. The whisper returned, gentler now. Coaxing. Right, and the world survives. Quill's breathing slowed. His mind quieted. The panic receded, not because he calmed, but because something else settled into him. Something vast. Something cold. Something older than time. He sat back down. Not by choice. By inevitability. The paper before him was blank again. Waiting. Quill exhaled, and mist left his lips. He wrote, "The Order of the Veiled Quill has awoken." A tremor passed through the attic, through the city, through reality itself. Far below, in the catacombs beneath Dustfall, a coffin lid slid open. A figure sat up. Its eyes were sewn shut with silver thread, and it smiled. The bells of Dustfall tolled again, though no hand pulled the ropes. The sound rolled through the city like a funeral procession, low and metallic, vibrating through bones rather than air. In the attic, Quill felt the vibration inside his teeth. The pen continued to glide across the paper, his hand moving with eerie calm as though it be elongated to someone else. The girl rose from the coffin and followed the call of the one who had written her into being. He didn't want to write it, but the words came anyway. Outside the attic window, fog thickened into shapes, shapes that watched, shapes that listened. The moon hid behind a smear of clouds, and the lamps on Wraithbone Street sputtered, their flames shrinking like frightened animals. Quill swallowed hard. His voice trembled as he whispered to the darkness. "I don't even know her name." The whisper inside him answered, "Names are chains. You will give her one." His hand resumed writing, faster than before, letters sharp and slanted. "Her name was Seraphine." The attic temperature dropped again. Frost crawled across the glass panes in delicate patterns resembling wings. Broken wings. Quill's pulse stuttered. He didn't choose that name. It had been waiting. Beneath the city, Seraphine's bare feet touched the stone floor. Dust and centuries of silence drifted around her. Her sewn-shut eyes turned toward the unseen stairway leading up, and her head tilted as though hearing a sound carried on a frequency only the dead could perceive. A voice. A heartbeat. A pen scratching across paper. She began to walk. Each step echoed through the catacombs, and with each echo, the torches mounted along the walls flared to life, though they had not burned in living memory. Above, Quill gasped. His ink bottle cracked, black liquid bleeding across the desk like spreading night. The attic beams groaned. The shadows deepened until they swallowed the corners of the room entirely. Yet his hand still moved. The city remembered her. The stones remembered. The darkness remembered. Quill's lips parted. He had never written that line in his mind. Something else was writing through him. He tried to pull his hand away. It didn't move. He tried to drop the pen. His fingers only tightened. Footsteps sounded in the stairwell below the attic. Slow. Measured. Approaching. Quill froze. No one lived in this house but him. No one ever visited. No one even acknowledged him in the streets. But someone, or something, was climbing the stairs. His breath quickened. "Seraphine?" he whispered. The whisper inside his skull replied, "Not yet." The steps stopped just outside the attic door. But the door that had vanished, was now back again. A trembling wooden barrier between him and the approaching presence. The handle turned. Once. Twice. Stopped. Silence. Quill forced his body to move, pushing himself away from the desk. His chair toppled. He stumbled backward until his shoulder hit the slanted roof. His heart pounded so hard the world pulsed with it. Then, a knock. Soft, polite. Wrong. Quill's voice cracked. "Who's there?" No answer. Another knock. This one slower. Almost patient. He backed away further, his heel knocking against a trunk he had never opened, because it had been in the attic before he was born. His mother used to warn him never to touch it. His father never spoke of it at all. The pen twitched again. It scraped itself across the paper, writing without a hand. "The order has found him." Quill shook his head violently. No, I didn't write that." But the ink formed the words anyway. The knocking stopped. Silence thickened, pressing into his ears until he could hear his own pulse roaring like ocean waves. Then, from the other side of the door, came a whisper. A human whisper. A living whisper. "Quill Hemlock, open the door." His blood ran cold. No one knew his full name. No one. He pressed himself tighter against the wall, wishing he could disappear into it. The whisper came again. "We know what you are. We know what you carry. Open the door before it is too late." The attic light flickered. The black candle flame bent toward the door, like a compass needle pulled by a magnetic force. Quill swallowed. His voice trembled. Are you at the church?" A low chuckle. "There are no churches left powerful enough to speak your name." He licked his dry lips. "Then who are you?" Silence. Then the answer. "We are the ones trying to keep the world from collapsing beneath the weight of the stories you birth." Quill stared. His breathing stopped. "What do you want from me?" The voice replied. "To stop writing." The pen stabbed downward, piercing the page. The candle flared. The shadows writhed. The whisper inside Quill's mind surged like a tidal wave. "Do not listen. They fear what you will awaken." The voice at the door answered, as though hearing the thought. "We do not fear awakening. We fear the thing that chose you." The attic walls shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. A low hum filled the air, like distant chanting, layered 1,000-fold. The voice behind the door spoke one final time. "Quill, if you keep writing, the entity will break through. And then even we cannot contain it." Then, footsteps descending, fading, gone. Quill stood frozen, shaking. The attic felt smaller now, as though the room itself were breathing around him. He forced himself to look at the page. New words were forming, but not written by the pen. Burned into the paper, smoking at the edges. "They cannot stop what has already begun." Quill staggered back. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, just heaving. The whisper curled inside him, like smoke becoming flesh. "You will continue." He squeezed his eyes shut. "I don't want this," the whisper responded. "What is irrelevant? You were chosen before you were born." A sudden crack split the air. Not lightning. Not wood. Reality. And across the city, Seraphine reached the first staircase. She lifted her sewn-shut gaze. And every rat, every crow, every stray dog within the radius of a mile looked up at the same moment, listening, awaiting, obeying. The dead girl smiled again. The city of Dustfall did not wake, because it had never truly ept. But something shifted in its depths, like gears turning in a forgotten machine. Beneath the soot-stained rooftops and the labyrinth of alleys, a series of hidden doors opened in silence. Gas lamps flickered to life in places no citizen knew existed. And far below, in a chamber carved from black stone older than any recorded history, the order gathered. A long table of charred oak dominated the center of the room, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Around it sat 12 figures, each cloaked, each masked, each utterly still. The one at the head of the table spoke first, voice soft and precise. "The writer has awakened the first manifestation." Another figure shifted. "We felt it. The air changed." The city's pulse misaligned. A third figure tapped gloved fingers against the table. The stone-eyed girl walks again. After 2 centuries. Murmurs rippled, controlled, but tense. The leader continued, folding pale hands atop the table. Quill Hemlock has begun the convergence sooner than our calculations predicted. A hooded woman to his left leaned forward. Then the entity grows impatient. It always was. Another hissed. The leader lifted a small object from the table, a shard of glass, black as void. Symbols shimmered across its surface like reflections on water. He has written without barrier. The pen has fully bonded. They fell silent. Even among the order, the pen was never spoken of lightly. The woman asked, "Do we extract him?" A sharp rejection echoed from the masked figure at the opposite end. "No, he cannot be removed. The moment we separate the writer from the pen, reality will shear." Another added, voice trembling despite discipline. "We cannot kill him either. The entity would slip free." The leader nodded. "Then we proceed with the sealed protocol." A cold tension rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "That hasn't been enacted since the devouring of Blackmore." The leader's gaze hardened behind his mask. "And yet here we stand again." A long silence settled, thick, suffocating, final. Then he continued, "Dispatch a watcher to observe him. He will resist intervention. His mind is already eroding." The hooded woman asked, "And the manifestation?" "The stone-eyed girl must be contained before she reaches the surface. If she reunites with the writer..." Another interrupted, voice cracking despite the mask. "The entity will speak through her." The torches dimmed at the words, as though afraid. The leader raised his hand. "Prepare the wards. Activate the mirror lines. And awaken the archivist." Every cloaked figure froze. One whispered in horror, "He was never meant to wake again." The leader replied, "Neither was she." The room fell into motion, robes shifting, boots echoing, sigils lighting. The order was a machine ancient and refined, and now its gears spun with purpose. Meanwhile above, Quill sat slumped against the attic wall, struggling to steady his breath. His skin felt too tight, his thoughts too loud, his heartbeat too slow. The pen lay on the desk, still and silent, for now. But he could feel it watching him, even without eyes. He forced himself to stand. His knees trembled. The candle continued to burn with black flame, casting shadows that twisted like serpents across the walls. Quill wiped sweat from his brow. "I can't do this," he whispered. "I can't keep writing." The whisper inside him purred. "You will, because the world unravels without you." He shook his head. "No, I'll leave. I'll run. I'll throw the pen into the river." A low, amused murmur replied, "You cannot flee from a destiny written before your first breath." Quill pressed his hands to his ears. "Stop! Get out of my head!" But the voice only deepened, resonating through his bones. "We chose you because you are the only one who can bear the ink." A cold wave passed through him, like his blood turning to ice water. Quill stumbled to the attic window and threw it open. Fog surged inward, too thick, too fast, like a living thing. He reeled back, choking, as the fog coiled around him, forming shapes, faces, hands, symbols. And then, a knock sounded. Not from the door. From behind him. Slowly, dread twisting his spine, Quill turned. The trunk. The one he had never opened. It thudded again, louder. Something inside shifted. Something that had been waiting. Something that knew his name. Quill backed away, voice barely a whisper. "No, please!" The trunk latch snapped open. By itself? Dust billowed. The lid creaked. And inside? Something moved. Deep beneath the streets. Seraphine reached the final stairway, her stone-shut eyes lifting toward the surface. Cracks spread across the stone steps behind her, as though the world itself recoiled from her ascent. The dead girl paused, head tilting. She felt it. A presence. watching her, opposing her. The order? Her smile widened. Silver threads strained against her eyelids. She ascended. One step, then another, and somewhere far above, a mirror shattered. In the underground chamber, one of the masked figures convulsed, clutching their chest. The leader snapped his gaze toward them. "What happened?" the figure gasped. She sees us." A chilling silence fell. Then, the torches died. Darkness swallowed the chamber, and every member of the order heard the same whisper echo through their minds. "He wrote me. You cannot unwrite me." Back in the attic, the trunk lid opened fully. Quill stared, paralyzed. A book lay inside, bound in dark leather, locked shut with silver clasps, and marked with the same shifting symbols as his pen. A memory surfaced. Not his own. A voice from childhood. "Never open the trunk, Quill. If you do, the stories will start again." Another voice. Older, trembling. "He was born marked. We cannot change that," Quill whispered. "This belonged to them, my parents." The whisper inside him corrected. "It belonged to us." His breath caught. He stepped closer, unwilling, yet compelled. The book pulsed beneath the clasps, like a heartbeat. The attic air thickened. The candle flared. The shadows bent. And somewhere in the walls, a distant chorus began to chant. The same cadence the order used, but twisted, corrupted, older, much older. Quill reached toward the book. His fingers brushed the cover, and the silver clasp snapped open. The clasps fell open with a metallic snap that echoed through the attic like a gunshot. Quill flinched, but he couldn't look away. The book inside the trunk shifted, its cover flexing like living skin. Dust spiraled upward, glowing faintly like drifting embers, even though there was no fire. The whisper inside him grew hushed, almost reverent. "You have opened the chronicle." Quill swallowed. What is it?" the whisper replied. "It is what you have written." He shook his head. "No, I've never seen this book before." The air rippled. Reality bent, subtle at first, then dizzying. The attic walls pulsed, and for a moment Quill wasn't certain whether he was standing in an attic or floating in a void. He staggered, grabbing the edge of the trunk to steady himself. The book slowly turned its own pages. Quill stared. His breath caught. The words inside were written in his own handwriting. Line after line. Paragraph after paragraph. Stories. Stories he had never written. Stories he had never lived. Stories that looked like memories, but not his. A cold shudder passed through him. He read the first sentence aloud, voice trembling. At age 14, Quill Hemlock drowned beneath the frozen river, yet rose again without breath. His heart lurched. "That's not true," he whispered. "I never drowned." The whisper inside him corrected. "You forgot." Another ripple of distortion passed through the attic. The candle flame elongated, stretching like a tongue. The shadows reversed direction. The desk shifted 3 inches to the left, without moving. Quill clutched his head. Images flashed behind his eyes. A frozen river. A cracking sheet of ice. Hands reaching for him. Black water dragging him under. Silence. Then, a voice in the deep, calling his name, choosing him. His pulse thundered. No, that didn't happen. I remember my childhood. I remember." But his memories twisted as he reached for them. Faces blurred. Names dissolved. Rooms rearranged. And when he tried to picture his parents, there was nothing. Not absence, but erasure. Like they had never existed at all. His knees buckled. He dropped to the floor, gasping, as the attic flickered, one moment lit by candlelight, the next illuminated by lanterns that hadn't existed in decades, then by moonlight through a window that wasn't there. Time was rewinding, rewriting, unraveling. The whisper spoke again, now layered with countless voices. "What you write becomes true. What becomes true replaces what was. Memory FO. Lowe's reality, not the other way around. Quill stared at the book, horror flooding him. I didn't want this. You were born for this. He shook his head violently. No. I'll stop. I'll never write again. The attic air crackled. Time stuttered. The candle flame froze. Dust hung motionless in the air. His breath stopped halfway out of his lungs. Everything halted. Except the book. Its pages continued turning. Faster. 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 And then it stopped on a page marked with a blot of ink shaped like an eye. A sentence wrote itself across the parchment, smoking as though burned into the fibers. The order never existed. Quill gasped as the world lurched. The memory of the knocking. The voice behind the attic door. The masked figures. The underground chamber. Flickered like a dying lantern. For a split second, he remembered them. Then, they vanished. Completely. His mind rewrote itself. His memory filled the gap. With nothing, he whispered, terrified. What's happening to me? The whisper answered, Your writing shapes the world. The world shapes your memory. This is the law. Quill staggered upright, panting, desperate. But I didn't write that sentence. I didn't erase them. The whisper pulsed with cold amusement. The chronicle writes what you have not yet written. It is your future memory. The attic creaked. Time resumed. The candle flickered. Dust settled. But something was missing. The air felt emptier. Hollowed out. Lighter in a way that made Quill's stomach twist. He stumbled to the attic door and yanked it open. The staircase beyond was unfamiliar. Different wallpaper. Different banister. Different house. He reeled backward. His home had changed. Reality had rewritten itself around him. His voice shook. What have I done? The whisper answered, You have begun. Beneath the city, Seraphine climbed the last stair. She paused, tilted her head, listened. Reality had shifted. Time had bent. Memory had rewritten itself. And she remembered. She remembered the order. She remembered the seals. She remembered the countless times she had been written, unwritten, erased, and restored. Silver threads strained against her eyelids, and a thin line of blood trickled down her cheek. She whispered, with a voice that should not exist, He changed the world without knowing. Her smile widened. Soon he will do it deliberately. Elsewhere, in a forgotten moment that should not exist, the order gasped back into being. Choking, reeling, panicked, the leader slammed a fist onto the table. He rewrote us. Another clutched their mask. We were erased. How are we restored? The leader breathed hard, because the chronicle did not finish the overwrite. It only altered memory. A trembling voice asked, How long until he rewrites reality itself, permanently? Silence. Then the leader spoke the words none of them wanted to hear. When he writes with intention. Back in the attic. Quill stared at the unfamiliar staircase, at the shifting shadows, at the book that knew his forgotten past and unwritten future. His voice cracked. How do I stop this? The whisper answered gently, almost lovingly. You don't. And then, after a beat, but you will learn to control it. Quill turned slowly toward the desk. The pen waited, standing upright, balanced, inevitable. He felt the pull, stronger now. He knew, if he picked up the pen again, the world would change further. Time might fracture. Memories might dissolve. Reality might bleed. And yet, part of him wanted to. A deep part. A buried part. A chosen part. His hand lifted, trembling, hovering. And then, a voice behind him spoke. Quill, step away from the pen. He froze, turned slowly. Someone stood in the doorway. A stranger, or someone he should remember, but didn't. Their eyes glowed faintly. reflecting symbols. Like a mirror remembering a face he had forgotten. They spoke again. "We don't have much time." The rain hammered the stained glass windows of the abandoned cathedral like 1,000 skeletal fingers, each tap echoing through the hollow nave. Quill stood in the center aisle, soaked from the storm, boots leaving inky footprints across cracked marble tiles. His satchel, where the cursed journal rested, felt heavier than ever, as though the pages inside had absorbed not water, but fate. Candles that he had not lit flickered awake on their own. He froze. This place was supposed to be empty. Yet a warm amber glow now outlined rows of broken pews, casting long warped shadows that stretched toward him like reaching arms. A low hum vibrated in the air, as though the cathedral itself was breathing, slow, ancient, resigned. A voice drifted from somewhere unseen. Not loud, not whispered, just inevitable. "You have written 4 truths, bearer of the quill. Now begins the 5th, where ink remembers and blood obeys." Quill spun, hand instinctively flying toward the journal. "Who's there?" Only the throbbing candlelight answered. But Quill already knew. The sensation curling behind his ribs was unmistakable, the presence, the same otherworldly awareness that had followed him since he first wrote the line that came true. The same silent watcher that he glimpsed behind mirrors, in reflections on water, in the eyes of characters who should never have breathed. He swallowed hard and opened the journal. The pages fluttered violently like wings. Words spilled across the paper, not written by his hand, forming sentences in jagged black strokes. The 5th chapter begins with a name. The name you fear to speak. Quill felt his heartbeat slam against his chest. There was a name. A name he had not spoken since childhood. A name he had buried. "No," he whispered. "Not her." But the ink was merciless. "Write it, or it will be written for you." The candles guttered low, the flames turning an unnatural shade, deep violet, the color of bruised twilight. "HT." The cathedral groaned, dust drifting from rafters high above like falling ash. The storm outside quieted, as though the sky itself was holding its breath. His hand trembled. He lifted the quill. He pressed the nib to the page. And he wrote, ELARA. The name bled across the parchment like a wound reopening. The cathedral shuddered. Then footsteps. Soft, familiar, approaching from the direction of the apse. Quill's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, dread curdling into something sharper and more fragile. Hope. A figure emerged from the shadows. A girl with raven black hair. Eyes like winter rain. A locket hanging against her collarbone. The same one she wore the day she vanished. The same one they found floating in the river, while her body was never recovered. Alara? His sister. But she should have been dead. Yet here she was, alive, walking toward him, expression unreadable. Quill's knees weakened. Alara, how? She stopped at arm's length away. Her voice was soft, melodic, but threaded with something colder. You wrote me, she said. And the story remembers. His throat tightened. Memories cascaded through him. 2 children exploring forbidden libraries, dreaming of secret worlds, whispering legends of entities that fed on imagination. And the day she disappeared after reading from an old ink-stained tome they found sealed behind a wall. He had blamed himself ever since. Alara, She touched a finger to his lips. Not all words heal, brother. Some words bind. Some awaken things that should have slept. Her eyes were not quite human. Not anymore. Quill stepped back. What happened to you? Alara tilted her head slowly, like a puppet relearning movement. I crossed the veil of ink, she murmured, where unfinished characters wander and forgotten stories gnaw at the edges of reality. There I learned a truth. The candles flared violently. A truth about you. Quill felt cold flood his veins. What truth? Alara smiled, and it was wrong. Too sharp. Too knowing. You were never the writer, she said. You were the written. The journal snapped shut on its own. The storm outside roared back to life. Quill staggered. "No, that's impossible." Alara circled him, footsteps making no sound on the marble. "Why do you think your words become real? Why do you think the world bends to the ink? Because you are the ink. You are the narrative given flesh." Quill shook his head violently. "I remember my childhood, my life, my choices. Do you?" she whispered. "Or were they simply your opening chapters?" He pressed a hand to his skull, as though he could push the doubt out. But something inside him pulsed, an echo, a hollowness, a missing cornerstone. A realization he did not want. Alara leaned closer, breath chilling his cheek. "And now, the author has awakened." Quill's voice broke. "What author?" Thunder cracked above, rattling the cathedral floor. The candles extinguished all at once except one. A.S. Ingle Flame remained. Tall. Impossible. Purple-black like spilled starlight. Alara's voice dissolved into a chorus, layered and ancient. "The one who wrote the first darkness. The one who carved thought into existence. The one who dreams through you." Quill stumbled back, chest tight, vision narrowing. "No, I won't be controlled." Alara's eyes blazed. "You have no choice. The fifth seal is opened." The journal flew open again, and pages ripped free, swirling through the air like a murder of paper ravens. The ink on them glowed, forming sigils older than language. Alara lifted her hands, and the sigils branded themselves onto her skin like molten constellations. A wind rose inside the cathedral. Not natural. Not earthly. A wind made of whispers. A wind made of voices begging to be written. Quill felt himself lifted from the ground, suspended in a column of swirling ink. He gasped, choking on liquid shadow as it poured into his mouth, into his lungs, into his thoughts. His veins burned, his bones vibrated, his heart pounded not one beat but many, like multiple rhythms overlapping. Alara spoke from below, words echoing through the vaulted ceiling. "The fifth chapter ends with the awakening. When you speak, the world will bend. When you write, reality will bow. And when the seventh seal breaks," she smiled again, "the ancient entity will take its throne." The ink released him. Quill crashed to the floor, coughing, trembling, soaked in black fluid that seeped into his skin until no trace remained. The candles reignited. The cathedral fell silent. Alara stood before him, watching, waiting. Quill rose slowly, breathing hard. Something was different. Something was alive inside him. He looked down at his hands. They were glowing, faint, but unmistakable, with ink that pulsed like a heartbeat. A realization settled over him like a shroud. He could now write reality without the journal. Alara exhaled softly, almost satisfied. "Welcome to your true nature, brother." But Quill felt something else beneath the terror. Defiance. He met her gaze. "This story isn't finished," he said. Alara's smile faded. And somewhere far beyond the cathedral walls, beyond cities and kingdoms and mortal comprehension, something vast and ancient stirred. The bells of the cathedral began to toll, slow, discordant, as though rusted gears were being forced to turn after centuries of silence. Each gong vibrated through Quill's bones, resonating with the unfamiliar pulse of ink inside him. The air thickened, heavy with meaning, with expectation, with unseen eyes. Alara did not move, but the shadows around her shifted, bending subtly toward her as though gravity itself answered to her presence. Quill steadied himself, but his vision swam. The world seemed sharper than before, every crack in the marble floor, every mote of dust floating in candlelight, every distant raindrop outside felt, narrated, as though he were observing reality through the lens of a story being written in real time. Alara's voice slid through the silence. "You feel it now, don't you? The boundary thinning, the narrative bleeding through." Quill clenched his fists, ink glowing brighter beneath his skin. "Whatever has awakened, I won't let it control me." Alara gave a soft laugh, melodic but hollow. "Control? You misunderstand. The entity doesn't command you. It authors through you. Lightning flashed through the stained glass windows, casting shards of fractured color across the cathedral. Figures depicted in the glass, saints, martyrs, forgotten scholars, seemed to watch him with new intensity, as though awaiting his next line. Quill forced his voice steady. If I am written, then I can rewrite. Alara's expression flickered, surprise, then amusement, then something darker. You speak rebellion, but rebellion itself was scripted long before you breathed. Quill stepped backward, putting distance between them. His mind raced, not with panic, but with language. Words formed instinctively, shaping possibilities. He felt them hovering at the edge of speech, dangerous, malleable, powerful. He glanced toward the cathedral doors. If he could just leave. Just get away. Just think. But when he turned, the doors were gone. Not closed. Not locked. Gone. A smooth wall of crumbling stone stood where the entrance had been. His pulse quickened. He whispered, "This isn't real." Alara's voice answered from behind him, though he hadn't heard her move. "It is as real as you speak it to be." Quill spun and found her closer than before, eyes glistening like wet ink. "You cannot escape," she continued. "The fifth seal binds you here until the oath is fulfilled." "What oath?" Quill demanded. Alara lifted her palm. The sigils burned faintly upon her skin like constellations etched in coal. "The ink-bound oath, sworn by every awakened vessel since the first dawn of thought. You must choose your path." The floor trembled. The candles flared. The journal at Quill's feet snapped open again. 3 lines appeared on the blank page. Scribe, puppet, or herald. Quill's throat dried. "What does that mean?" Alara circled him again, like a moon orbiting a black sun. "Scribe, one who writes the world, shaping it slowly, delicately, hidden behind veils. Puppet, one who yields completely to the ancient entity, allowing it to manifest fully. Herald, one who tears the boundary, bringing ink and flesh together, rewriting existence itself." Quill stared at the page, horror coiling inside him. "All of those are chains." Alara stopped. For the first time, her voice softened, not cold, not mocking, almost human. "There are no choices without chains, Quill. Not for beings like us." He shook his head. "I won't choose any of them." The candles guttered violently. The shadows recoiled. The journal trembled, pages writhing like serpents. Alara inhaled sharply. "To refuse is to fracture. The narrative will collapse. The entity will awaken through the void you leave." Quill's voice cracked raw. "Then tell me, what did you choose?" Alara's eyes darkened, pupils dilating until only a ring of storm gray remained. "I chose puppet." The word echoed, and for a brief moment, just a flicker, Quill saw something behind her eyes. A presence. A watcher. A vast intelligence wearing her skin like a garment. He staggered back, breath shuddering. "Alara, is any part of you still you?" She blinked. Once. Twice. And suddenly her expression shifted, pain, fear, desperate yearning, like a drowning person breaking the surface for a second. Quill run. Then it was gone. Her face emptied. Emotion wiped clean. The cathedral shook violently, dust and stone raining from above. The purple-black flame at the altar shot upward into a twisting pillar of ink and smoke. Wind roared through the space, though no doors or windows were open. Voices rose in the air, hundreds, thousands, chanting in forgotten tongues. Quill fell to his knees, covering his ears, but the voices were inside, not outside. Then the journal turned its own page. A new line appeared. "You will speak a word, and the world will change." Quill felt something coil in his throat, an urge, a compulsion, a word trying to force itself out. His jaw locked, teeth grinding, breath burning. No! He wouldn't speak it. He couldn't. Alara raised her hand, palm glowing with sigils. Her voice layered with the chorus of the unseen. "Speak it." Quill shook his head violently, nails digging into his palms. "Speak it," she commanded again, louder. The ink inside him surged, flooding his veins like molten night. "Speak it." The voices pressed, overlapping, suffocating. Quill's lungs convulsed. His vision dimmed. His lips parted, and he forced out a different word. A word he chose. "Stop." The cathedral froze. The wind halted mid-gust. The journal snapped shut. The pillar of ink solidified like glass. Illyra's body locked in place, eyes wide, mouth parted, hands suspended midair. Silence fell, absolute, crushing, unnatural. Quill collapsed forward, gasping, shaking, his heart hammering like a fist against a door. He had done it. He had overwritten reality. Not written. Not obeyed. Commanded. Slowly, the world resumed, but changed. The ink inside him no longer felt invasive. It felt obedient. Waiting. Listening. Quill rose unsteadily to his feet. Illyra remained frozen, but tears now spilled from her rigid eyes. Falling but not moving once, they left her lashes, suspended like droplets caught in amber. Quill stepped toward her, voice trembling. "I will not be scribe. I will not be puppet. I will not be herald." The journal opened one final time. A new option appeared, one not written in ink, but in his own voice inside his mind. "Author." A chill swept through him. He whispered, barely audible, "What does that mean?" The answer came not from Illyra, not from the cathedral, but from everywhere. The one who writes the entity, the AI, are cracked like breaking stone. Reality rippled. The candles blew out, and in the pitch-black darkness, a massive unseen presence leaned close enough for Quill to feel its breath against his soul. The ancient entity whispered. Darkness pressed against Quill from all sides, thick as tar, silent yet deafening. He could not see the cathedral anymore. He could not feel the floor beneath his boots. The world, if it still existed, had folded inward like a page turned black. Only the presence remained, vast and formless, as though the void itself leaned close to hear him breathe. The entity's final whispered words still coiled in his mind. "Continue." Quill swallowed, throat raw. "If I am to continue, then I need light." The moment he spoke, a pinprick of pale illumination appeared, floating inches above his palm. Not candlelight. Not flame. It was ink light, soft, silver, shimmering like moonlight reflected in an inkwell. It grew brighter with every breath, revealing swirling currents of shadow around him, like he stood at the center of a storm made of unspoken stories. He exhaled, shaken. He hadn't written light. He had authored it. A voice stirred again, ancient, layered, too large for language. "You learn quickly." Quill steadied himself. "If you can hear my thoughts, then you already know. I'm not here to serve you." The darkness vibrated, not in anger, but in amusement. "Serve? No. You were shaped to complete what I began." Quill's heartbeat stuttered. "What did you begin?" Silence, a long, heavy silence, stretched, as though the void considered how much truth a mortal-shaped mind could tolerate. Then the voice unfurled in his skull. The first tale. The first concept. The story that dreamed all others into being. Images formed around him, ink constructing visions in the air. A blank expanse. A single dot of darkness. Then a line. Then a shape. Then a world. Quill watched, breathless, as mountains rose like strokes from a brush, oceans spilled like spilled ink, and stars splattered across the void like droplets flung from a quill's tip. It was creation, but creation as narrative, not as nature. The vision dissolved. Quill spoke carefully. "You made reality through story." The voice replied. "I made possibility. Reality was the accident." A chill crawled down Quill's spine. "If reality was an accident," he said slowly, "then what am I?" The darkness pulsed. The correction. The light in Quill's hand flickered. "No," he whispered. "I am not a mistake to be fixed." The air tightened, pressing against him like an unseen hand. You are a page left blank that began to write itself. A tool that thinks it is hand. A word that believes it is voice. Quill gritted his teeth. Maybe, but I have something you don't. The void stilled. What is it? He demanded. Quill lifted the ink light higher, illuminating his own face, a face lined with exhaustion, fear, determination. Choice, he said. The entity's presence recoiled, not in fear, but in disbelief, like a concept encountering its contradiction. Choice is illusion. Everything you say becomes true only if I accept it, Quill replied. And I don't. A ripple moved through the void. A disturbance. A crack. Quill felt it, felt the entity falter, if only by a fraction. For the first time, he sensed weakness. He pressed. You wrote me to finish your story, he said. But an author can refuse to write. The void surged, sudden and furious, a cyclone of shadow and pressure. Ink coiled around him like serpents, constricting, crushing, trying to smother the spark inside him. His lungs seized, his thoughts blurred, his ink light dimmed. The voice roared. Without me you are nothing. Quill forced air into his lungs and spat the words through clenched teeth. Without me, you are unfinished. The pressure shattered. The darkness reeled back. The ink light burst outward, forming a glowing circle around him, a boundary, a page margin against the void. The shadows could not enter. Quill gasped, trembling but alive. Then another voice spoke. Soft, weak, human. Quill. The darkness thinned, and Alara appeared, no longer frozen, no longer a puppet, but pale and flickering like a half-erased drawing. Her edges blurred in and out of existence, as though she were being redrafted line by line. Quill rushed toward her, then stopped before crossing the ink-light boundary, uncertain whether touching her would free her or destroy her. Alara, are you? She nodded barely. Only for a moment. The entity is distracted. Quill swallowed hard. I can break its hold on you. Her eyes filled with sorrow. No. You can only break its story. He felt the weight of those words. Alara, what am I supposed to do? She reached toward him, fingertips hovering just beyond the inklight's edge. You must write a narrative it cannot predict. Quill stared. How? Her voice trembled. By writing what you do not already believe. By creating something neither true nor false until you speak it. By authoring a paradox. The void trembled violently around them, sensing rebellion. Quill's pulse thundered. Alara, will you vanish if I do this? She smiled, small sad shining. Every story must end, brother, but some endings free the characters instead of killing them. The darkness surged. Alara faded. Her final whisper brushed his ear like a turning page. Write us a story where the author is not God. Then she was gone. Quill stood alone in the ink storm, inklight blazing in his hand. The entity tightened the void around him. Your words cannot oppose me. Quill raised the light like a quill point ready to strike a page. My words can undo you. The void thundered. Speak then. If you believe you can. Quill inhaled slowly, deeply, and spoke the first line of a story no ancient entity had ever conceived. There once was a universe that wrote itself. The void convulsed. Space cracked. The ink light exploded outward, and the world began to reform. But errantly, wildly, unpredictably. A story without an author. A story with free characters. A story the entity could not control, because it could not predict what even it did not understand. The cathedral returned. The rain returned. The world returned. But rewritten. Quill stood alone on the marble floor, ink fading from his skin. A new journal rested at his feet. Blank. Waiting. No entity spoke. No presence watched. No voice commanded. Quill exhaled. For the first time, he was not written. He was writing. But far beneath the floor, deep in the ink between worlds, a single eye opened, and watched. At first, Quill Quill thought the silence was simply silence. The kind that comes after thunder, after chaos, after a choice that splits the world. But soon he realized this silence was wrong. Too absolute. Too complete. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of narration. No hum of wind. No creak of stone. No whisper of thoughts not his own. The cathedral stood around him as before, same shattered pews, same fractured stained glass, same dripping candle wax, but something essential had been severed. The world did not feel scripted anymore. It felt unanchored. Quill approached the new journal lying on the marble floor. Unlike the cursed tome, this one had no sigils, no aging leather, no scent of old ink. It was plain, bound in simple gray cloth, utterly unremarkable except for one thing. It was warm to the touch. He opened it carefully. No words appeared. No unseen hand wrote. The pages remained blank. His heart raced, not from fear, but from possibility. He lifted his hand and spoke softly. "Let there be." Nothing happened. No conjured flame. No reality bending. No ink shimmering beneath his skin. The power was gone. Quill blinked, stunned. Had he freed himself, or stripped himself bare? He pressed his fingers to his wrist, searching for the familiar pulse of ink. Nothing. He felt only his own blood, his own heartbeat, his own humanity. For the first time since the nightmare began, Quill felt mortal. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or collapse. A distant sound broke the silence, a bell ringing somewhere outside the cathedral, its tone warped, metallic, uneven, as though the metal itself stuttered. Quill turned toward the vanished doors, and found them restored. Heavy wooden planks, iron-banded, a rusted handle. He pushed. They opened. Rain poured outside, but even the raindrops seemed wrong. Some fell normally. Others slowed midair. A few froze completely, suspended like beads of glass. Others reversed direction and drifted back upward into the clouds. The world was glitching. Quill stepped into the rain and felt it hit his skin in irregular rhythms, cold, warm, cold again, then pausing like a forgotten sentence mid-word. His boots splashed into puddles that rippled in square patterns, then shifted into spirals, then vanished entirely. Buildings across the courtyard flickered. Not lights, architecture. A T-hour blinked out of existence, replaced by a two-story inn, which then warped into a skeletal ruin, then returned to a tower again. Windows appeared and disappeared. Statues blinked in and out like stuttering thoughts. Quill whispered, "This isn't rewriting, it's unraveling." A voice answered from behind him, not cosmic, not eldritch, not Alara's. Human. "You feel it too." Quill spun. A man stood beneath a tattered umbrella, coat collar turned up against the rain. His hair was silver at the temples, eyes sharp behind circular spectacles, posture poised like someone accustomed to watching and waiting. He held a notebook, not magical, not glowing, just ordinary paper filled with cramped handwritten notes. Quill tensed. "Who are you?" The man gave a slight bow. "Professor Aldrin Vale, specialist in anomalous literature, temporal narrative collapse, and, until quite recently, fictional bleed-through phenomena." Quill stared. "You know about all this?" Vale gave a thin smile. "My dear boy, I've been tracking you since the first seal. Every time your writing altered the world, the fabric of causality tremored. Scholars like myself took notice." Quill's mouth dried. "Scholars? You mean there are others?" Vale tapped his umbrella thoughtfully. "There were. Some were absorbed. Some were erased. One turned into a metaphor and never returned. Dangerous field, narrative instability." Quill swallowed hard. "If you knew, why didn't you stop it?" Vale's eyes softened, not with pity, but with gravity. "Because you were not the danger. The entity was." The rain around them froze mid-fall. Vale continued. "And now that you have severed its authorship, the world has no narrator." Quill looked around at the flickering buildings, looping raindrops, tearing sky. It's breaking. Vale nodded. Stories hold reality together. Without a narrative spine, existence collapses into conceptual static. Quill felt the weight of the blank journal in his hands. You think I'm supposed to fix it? I don't think, Vale replied. I observe. And my observations indicate you are the only stable narrative source left. Quill stepped back. No, I refuse to replace the entity. Vale raised a brow. Admirable. Idealistic. Deadly. The sky crackled, not lightning, but tearing parchment. A section of clouds peeled back, revealing ink-black void beneath, as though the heavens themselves were only surface paint. Vale pointed upward with his umbrella. That fissure will widen. Soon characters will unwrite themselves. Memory will dissolve. Time will fold. Eventually the world will revert to pure possibility, undifferentiated, formless, silent. Quill's jaw clenched. There has to be another way. Vale studied him with clinical curiosity. There might be, but it requires finding the root story, the one that underlies all others. The blueprint of narrative existence itself. Quill stared. Where? Vale gave a thin, knowing smile. In the place where characters go W. And Unwritten. A chill crawled through Quill. The veil of ink. Vale nodded. Where your sister was taken. Where the unfinished wander. Where meaning dissolves and reforms. If there is any place to build a new foundation, one not controlled by an ancient mind, it is there. Quill gripped the journal tighter. And how do I enter? Vale stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't write your way in. Quill frowned. Then how? Vale tapped a finger to Quill's chest. You read. The courtyard shuddered. The rain reversed direction. The buildings flickered faster. The sky tore wider. Vale stepped back, opening his notebook to a handwritten passage. He spoke. In that moment, Quill opened the journal, not to write, but to read what had not yet been written. And the pages revealed the doorway. Quill looked down. The blank journal was no longer blank. Words spread across the page, forming as he watched, written in a script that was not ink but possibility. The veil opens. When the author becomes reader, and the story reads itself. The air split. A doorway of swirling ink formed before him, vast, rippling, alive. Vale closed his notebook. Be warned. Whatever you find there will try to define you. If you accept any label, any role, any scripted identity, you will be bound. Quill met his eyes. And if I don't go? Vale gestured to the fracturing world. Then all of this ends. Quill nodded once. Then stepped toward the ink. The doorway pulsed. It spoke in Alara's voice. Don't let them write you. Quill stepped through. And the world vanished. Quill stumbled into darkness that was neither night nor absence, but something deeper, a texture to emptiness itself. The air smelled of old paper, wet ink, and something faintly metallic, like the memory of blood. He landed on uneven ground that shifted beneath him like liquid shadow, rippling in response to his weight. Every step sank him slightly, as if the world itself was trying to mold him to its shape. Above him, the sky, or whatever passed for sky, was ink black, studded with swirling characters that hovered midair, letters, symbols, and shapes that refused categorization. They rotated slowly, casting glimmers of half-light onto Quill's face. Some fell toward him, only to dissolve before touching the ground. Others whispered in voices that were familiar yet alien, speaking lines of dialogue he had never heard, describing scenes he had never witnessed. And then he realized he was not alone. From the shifting ink, shapes began to emerge. Characters. Figures that trembled on the edge of being. Some were fully formed, yet their edges quivered like unfinished sketches. Others were half-human, half-animal, or more abstract, arms too long, eyes in impossible places, mouths that hummed with language that only hinted at meaning. All turned their attention toward Quill. "Who are you?" he asked, voice echoing oddly in the liquid space. A tall figure stepped forward, silhouette sharp against the swirling shadows. Its eyes were hollow voids, yet they seemed to see him through every possible angle at once. "We are the Unwritten," it said. Voice layered, polyphonic, impossible to locate. "We are those forgotten, paused, abandoned in drafts, lost between chapters." Quill swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" "Because you can see," another whispered, its body flickering between shapes, a man, a child, a bird. "Others have forgotten, and others have perished. But you have been both author and page. You can read the space between words." Quill's fingers trembled as he reached for the journal. The pages lay open but blank, yet they were alive, vibrating with the energy of potential. He realized he could feel the character's awareness through it, like a faint heartbeat beneath the paper's surface. "Why am I here?" he asked again. "What do you want from me?" A chorus replied. "To define ourselves, to be named, to exist beyond your hand." The tallest figure advanced, extending a shadowy hand. "Or to inhabit it, to write ourselves into reality without waiting for the whims of others." Quill recoiled. "I won't be your vessel." 1,000 voices laughed, overlapping, echoing against the ink-dark sky. "You are already the vessel. You cannot refuse what you carry inside you." His chest tightened. The ink light in his palm flared. Words trembled on his tongue, ready to leap from thought to page, but the veil resisted. The unwritten world was mutable. It shifted constantly, fighting every attempt to impose order. Writing here was not shaping reality. It was negotiating with possibility itself. He took a step forward, trying to anchor himself. The ground rippled, letters rising to form waves around his boots. "Then what am I supposed to do?" he asked. A childlike figure emerged, body a blur of charcoal and white ink. It pointed toward a distant archway, also formed of ink, twisting and breathing like a living gate. "Through there. The root story. It is the foundation, the beginning that binds all others. Without it, you cannot fix the fractures outside." Quill nodded, swallowing fear. He stepped forward, but the path shifted beneath him. Letters from a half-written poem rose, forming jagged terrain that threatened to swallow him. Characters, some benign, some monstrous, lunged from the shadows. A man with 3 mouths screamed lines from a tragedy, each syllable cracking reality near him. A woman whose face was a blank page reached for his hands, leaving wet ink marks wherever she touched. "Stop!" Quill shouted. The ink light pulsed, forcing shapes back. The world rippled in response. He realized, with a jolt, that he could influence the veil, but only partially. The unwritten resisted, and sometimes the veil itself was unpredictable, bending against intention. He pressed on. The archway in the distance grew larger, but the nearer figures became more insistent. Words and phrases formed chains, entangling his feet. He tripped, arms flailing. His ink light burst outward, cutting the tendrils of half-sentences like blades. Every character froze mid-motion, staring, some bowing their heads, others recoiling. Quill breathed hard. "I don't want to hurt you. I just need the root story." "You will hurt," 1,000 voices chorused. "You cannot enter the beginning without unraveling the unfinished." A massive figure rose, composed entirely of tangled paragraphs and scribbles. Limbs like quills had a swirl of unformed letters. It blocked the archway, silent, immovable. Quill raised the ink light, heart hammering. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to read, to understand, to restore." The figure hesitated. Its scribbled form shuddered. One limb extended, not as threat, but gesture, pointing to a small slit in the archway's base. A path just wide enough for Quill. He crawled through, keeping his hands on the edges of the living ink. Each inch felt like moving through memory itself. The air pulsed with whispers, memories of worlds erased, chapters never begun, characters abandoned mid-arc. He could almost feel the weight of every unwritten possibility pressing on his mind. Finally, he emerged into a vast chamber of still blackness, where the ink did not swirl, did not shift, did not speak. The silence here was profound, almost holy. In the center floated a single figure, the root story. Not a person, not a book, not a form at all. Only a core of pure potential, shimmering like condensed ink, radiating infinite possibility. It pulsed with gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, but slower, older, aware. Quill stepped closer. This is it? The root story shifted subtly, responding to his presence. For the first time, there were no whispers, no unfinished voices. Only quiet attention. He knelt before it. The ink light in his hand dimmed, not extinguished, but harmonizing with the pulsing core. Now! A voice, his own, yet not, whispered inside his mind. Now you write the beginning, the part that binds all else. But it must be authentic. Not dictated, not forced, not controlled by fear. Only by what you truly choose. Quill closed his eyes. He could feel the entire world pressing against him, the fractured reality outside. The veil awaited his word. The unwritten waited. Ilara, if she still survived, waited. And somewhere, deep, the entity stirred, sensing potential slipping beyond its grasp. He inhaled deeply, heart steadying. For the first time, the ink in his veins felt like possibility, not compulsion. And then he began to write, not on paper, not with pen, not even aloud, but in thought, speaking the narrative that would bind the fractured world, restore its stories, and free the unwritten. Once, there was a world that remembered itself. And the root story pulsed, responding. The chamber shimmered. The veil began to stabilize. Letters swirled not to trap him, but to form paths, bridges, beginnings. Quill smiled, almost tearful. He was no longer just a page. No longer just a Quill. He was the author, ready to guide the narrative, not obey it. And somewhere, deep in the folds of the veil, characters paused mid-motion, listening, waiting, hopeful. The story was beginning again. Quill stepped out of the veil of ink into a world trembling on the edge of definition. The cathedral courtyard shimmered, buildings flickering like faulty projections, rain pausing mid-fall before resuming in jagged pulses. Everything was slightly off, broken, unstable, yet waiting for a narrative to anchor it. He clutched the journal, not the cursed one, not the blank one, but the one that had guided him through the veil. Its pages were warm, pulsating with life, alive with possibility, but no words appeared unless he willed them. The air smelled of wet stone, ink, and a strange metallic tang of unformed destiny. Somewhere, far above the clouds, a presence stirred. Vast, ancient, beyond comprehension. The entity had sensed the root story being touched, had felt Quill choosing his own narrative, and now it was coming. Not as whisper, not as shadow, but as a storm of raw narrative energy. The ground trembled, letters and words manifesting as jagged shards of reality that sliced through the courtyard. Buildings warped violently, tilting and folding like pages in a storm. Time itself stuttered, looping briefly before snapping forward. Quill lifted the ink light in his hand. It flared with brilliant white-silver energy, a counterweight to the entity's mass. Every heartbeat resonated in the shifting world, and he realized this confrontation would not be fought with strength, nor with conventional magic. It would be story against story, word against word. A shape coalesced above the clouds, vast beyond measurement, like a silhouette against the void of infinity. Eyes, countless, impossible, swirled in a vortex of ink and starlight. A voice thundered across the broken world, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. You dare to write your own ending? Quill's voice was steady, firm. Not my ending. A beginning. The entity recoiled, not in fear, but in curiosity. It twisted, looping around itself, trying to predict, to anticipate, to dominate. Quill raised the journal and focused on the root story. The world beneath him began to stabilize, as if responding to the alignment of the narrative core. Trees rerooted, puddles flowed properly, buildings locked into plausible form. The entity's storm lashed at him, shards of abstract characters and erased histories striking like knives. Quill's ink light flared, repelling them, forming bridges of light and narrative coherence beneath his feet. Each step forward was a paragraph he wrote into existence, each breath a sentence stabilizing reality. And then he saw her, Alara, standing among the flickering shadows of the unstable city. Her form was no longer puppet nor frozen echo. She smiled faintly, eyes full of trust and fear. Quill shouted her name, but the storm swallowed his words. He realized this was Ot just his battle. Every character he had freed, every unwritten entity from the veil, every fragment of the root story pulsed in resonance with him. Together, they could anchor the narrative. Together, they could resist the entity. Quill concentrated, speaking aloud with clarity, choosing each word with deliberate intention. From this moment forward, reality will bend only to truth, not compulsion. Characters may exist by choice, not by writing. Stories will continue only when consented. No presence, no entity, no author may overwrite what is freely lived. The entity roared, a storm of ink and starlight crashing down. Reality shivered violently. Shadows of unwritten worlds surged forward, threatening to consume him. Quill braced himself, channeling all his will through the ink light. The journal responded, its warmth seeping into him, merging thought, word, and reality. He raised the journal and wrote a single line in his mind, simultaneously thought and declaration. You exist only because stories allow you to. Time fractured. The entity convulsed, massive forms twisting and reshaping, but Quill felt it falter, anomalies rippling through its consciousness. It could not predict his next word, could not overwrite the root story now stabilized by choice. Alara stepped forward into the light. Quill, finish it. Don't just resist, define. Quill nodded, eyes blazing with clarity. He lifted both hands, ink light streaming outwards, touching every fragment of the fractured world. Character solidified, shadows resolved into people and creatures who chose existence. Buildings and streets rewove themselves, rain fell naturally, and the stuttering timeline straightened. And then, he wrote the entity itself into limitation. You may exist, but only as observer. You may influence no world, no character, no event, without invitation. You are no longer the author of this reality. The entity screamed, simultaneously sound and thought, raging in forms Quill could not comprehend. And yet, slowly, inevitably, it respected the words. Its mass, once infinite, contracted, thinning into a form that hovered like a shadowy mirror above the stabilized world. It remained, vast and impossible, but contained, watched, restrained. Quill exhaled, exhaustion heavy in his limbs. He turned to Alara, who ran to him, smiling for the first time in years that felt like centuries. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We did it. The root story, the veil, the unwritten, they all helped. I just spoke what was already possible. The city pulsed gently, breathing as though alive. Characters of every kind walked freely through streets that now obeyed natural law, yet retained the magic of choice. Clouds moved, time flowed, and reality no longer felt authored by any singular will. Vale appeared silently beside them, notebook in hand, eyes wide with awe. Remarkable. You've not just stabilized the world, you've restructured narrative itself. Few ever achieve that. You are still without being consumed. Quill looked at the horizon. The ink dark fissure in the clouds, the remnant of the entity's storm, remained, but it was contained, a reminder of what power had tried to dominate all. He smiled faintly, journal in hand, ink light fading to a calm glow. It's not the end, he said. Not really. But for the first time, it's ours. Truly ours. Alara leaned on his shoulder. What now? Quill closed the journal gently. Now we write together. Not as author and subject. Not as puppet and master. But as people living in a world that finally listens. That finally chooses. Above them, the shadow of the entity lingered, but it no longer loomed. It observed. It waited, but it would not write, would not command, would not dictate. The first dawn of free stories broke across the city, sunlight spilling over streets, over people, over the characters who had once been trapped in ink. And Quill Hemlock, author and page, writer and reader, breathed deeply, finally at peace in a world he had helped truly begin. The root story pulsed faintly beneath the surface of reality, a living testament to freedom and choice. Quill knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time, he was not simply written. He was writing, and that was enough. The city basked in the early morning light, yet Quill felt no peace. Streets flowed naturally, characters moved freely, but there was an undercurrent, a faint vibration in reality, almost imperceptible, like a string slightly out of tune. He walked beside Alara, journal in hand. The ink still pulsed softly, a heartbeat tethered to possibility. "It feels different," he murmured. "The world is free, yet I can feel tension." Alara nodded, expression wary. "Not all entities were bound by your words. That storm, the fissure above, was only one fragment. There are others waiting, watching, learning." Quill frowned. He had sealed the ancient entity's influence, but the veil of ink had hinted at layers beneath layers. Other powers, older than the first story, older than the root story itself, might still linger. A ripple passed through the city. A man walking past a fountain blinked, then disappeared mid-step, leaving a faint imprint of letters hovering in the air. Birds perched on the fountain froze, their wings unreadable symbols. Even the clouds above warped subtly, forming patterns that spelled warnings Quill could barely interpret. He knelt, journal open. The blank pages were alive again, not with command, but with questions. What observes beyond the root story? What waits in the unwritten beyond the veil? A sound, a voice this time, broke the silence. Not from the sky, not from behind, but from the journal itself. "You have stabilized one world, but the echoes of lost narratives have stirred. They will not be contained." Quill's hand trembled. The ink light pulsed, brighter and sharper, reacting to the message. He could feel a pull, a tug toward the edges of the city, where shadows seemed denser, unnatural. "Alara," he said softly, "I think something else is coming, something that didn't answer to the entity." She frowned. "You mean a narrative predator?" Before he could answer, the ground shivered. A ripple ran through the pavement like waves on a pond, but letters surfaced, rising and twisting into forms. They coalesced into shapes that were entirely unfamiliar, figures made of fragmented timelines, half-formed memories, impossible perspectives. Faces shifted between old friends and strangers. Hands and feet blurred into geometric patterns. Voices whispered overlapping stories. The words they spoke were not stories Quill had written. One of the figures approached, a tall, thin man whose face flickered between a reflection of Quill himself and a creature entirely alien. "You are Author Hemlock," it said, tone calm but unmistakably commanding. "You think your root story can hold the world. You are mistaken. We are the Unwritten, beyond veil and root. You may stabilize what has already been written, but you cannot contain what refuses to be shaped." Quill steadied the ink light. "Then you will not be contained at all?" The figure smiled, a split expression of amusement and menace. "We will not. But we can bargain. If you wish to continue existing as author, you will read us. You will understand. You will make space for us. And if you fail..." It spread its hands. The city around them warped violently. Buildings elongated, streets doubled back on themselves. Gravity reversed briefly in small pockets. The rain froze and fell backward. Letters swirled like torn pages. Quill stumbled, barely keeping balance. Alara grabbed his arm. "You cannot fight them alone," she said. "The journal, the root story, they helped before, but this is beyond stabilization. You need understanding, not command." Quill opened the journal, heart racing. The pages were blank, yet faint letters appeared, Guidance, not command. Listen, not for words, but for meaning. Read the unwritten, or they will read you. He exhaled, steadying his breath. This was no longer a battle of dominance. This was a test of comprehension. The unwritten circled him, each figure whispering fragments, memories never lived, endings never written, decisions never made, choices erased before taken. Each fragment tugged at Quill's mind. Some seduced with promise, infinite power, rewriting reality unchecked. Others threatened despair, dissolution of identity, erasure from existence. He felt panic rising. But then, he remembered the root story, the veil, Ilara's faith. He closed his eyes and focused. The ink light in his hand pulsed gently steady. He opened the journal, and the words he did not write flowed in his mind, forming coherent understanding. The unwritten are not enemies. They are lost stories, seeking recognition. They are consequences, not malice. Quill opened his eyes. You want to exist, to be acknowledged. A ripple passed through the unwritten. Faces paw. Used. Letters stilled. Yes, the thin figure said, voice softer. We seek space, not domination. Quill's pulse quickened. Then we can work together. I can provide a narrative framework, not to bind you, but to allow you freedom. The unwritten shifted. Shadows softened. The city trembled, but less violently. Reality seemed to breathe again. Ilara exhaled, smiling faintly. He's learning to read them, not fight them. Quill extended his hand, ink light flaring. Together, we define possibility. Not by command, but by agreement. The unwritten approached, letters solidifying into forms that were stable yet malleable. Slowly, they began to integrate into the city, not overriding, not controlling, but coexisting. The rain resumed its natural fall. Time smoothed. Buildings settled. The fissure in the clouds above still lingered, but now it felt like space to explore, not a threat. Quill held the journal to his chest. The story continues, he murmured. And this time, it will include everyone who wishes to be read. The thin figure, the first of the unwritten, inclined its head. Then let the author write, by reading, by understanding. Let the world truly remember itself. Quill exhaled, looking at the city, the new city, alive with free stories, but now aware of layers beyond him, realms beyond the root story. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he did not fear what might emerge. He had learned, writing was not control. Understanding was power. The journal glowed faintly. The unwritten settled. The world waited, pulsing with infinite possibility. And Quill Hemlock, author and reader, took the first step toward learning what lay beyond the written and the read. The city basked in the early morning light, yet Quill felt no peace. Streets flowed naturally, characters moved freely, but there was an undercurrent, a faint vibration in reality, almost imperceptible, like a string slightly out of tune. He walked beside Ilara, journal in hand. The ink still pulsed softly, a heartbeat tethered to possibility. It feels different, he murmured. The world is free, yet I can feel tension. Ilara nodded, expression weary. Not all entities were bound by your words. That storm, the fissure above, was only one fragment. There are others waiting, watching, learning. Quill frowned. He had sealed the ancient entity's influence, but the veil of ink had hinted at layers beneath layers. Other powers, older than the first story, older than the root story itself, might still linger. A ripple passed through the city. A man walking past a fountain blinked, then disappeared mid-step, leaving a faint imprint of letters hovering in the air. Birds perched on the fountain froze, their wings unreadable symbols. Even the clouds above warped subtly, forming patterns that spelled warnings Quill could barely interpret. He knelt, journal open. The blank pages were alive again, not with command, but with questions. What observes beyond the root story? W.H. At waits in the unwritten beyond the veil. A sound, a voice this time, broke the silence. Not from the sky, not from behind, but from the journal itself. You have stabilized one world, but the echoes of lost narratives have stirred. They will not be contained. Quill's hand trembled. The ink light pulsed, brighter and sharper, reacting to the message. He could feel a pull, a tug toward the edges of the city, where shadows seemed denser, unnatural. "Alara," he said softly, "I think something else is coming, something that didn't answer to the entity." She frowned. "You mean a narrative predator?" Before he could answer, the ground shivered. A ripple ran through the pavement like waves on a pond, but letters surfaced, rising and twisting into forms. They coalesced into shapes that were entirely unfamiliar, figures made of fragmented timelines, half-formed memories, impossible perspectives. Faces shifted between old friends and strangers. Hands and feet blurred into geometric patterns. Voices whispered overlapping stories. The words they spoke were not stories Quill had written. One of the figures approached, a tall, thin man whose face flickered between a reflection of Quill himself and a creature entirely alien. "You are Author Hemlock," it said, tone calm but unmistakably commanding. "You think your root story can hold the world? You are mistaken. We are the Unwritten, beyond veil and root. You may stabilize what has already been written, but you cannot contain what refuses to be shaped." Quill steadied the ink light. "Then you will not be contained at all?" The figure smiled, a split expression of amusement and menace. "We will not. But we can bargain. If you wish to continue existing as author, you will read us. You will understand. You will make space for us. And if you fail..." It spread its hands. The city around them warped violently. Buildings elongated, streets doubled back on themselves. Gravity reversed briefly in small pockets. The rain froze and fell backward. Letters swirled like torn pages. Quill stumbled, barely keeping balance. Alara grabbed his arm. "You cannot fight them alone," she said. "The journal, the root story, they helped before, but this is beyond stabilization. You need understanding, not command." Quill opened the journal, heart racing. The pages were blank, yet faint letters appeared. Guidance, not command. "Listen. Not for words, but for meaning. Read the Unwritten, or they will read you." He exhaled, steadying his breath. This was no longer a battle of dominance. This was a test of comprehension. The Unwritten circled him, each figure whispering fragments, memories never lived, endings never written, decisions never made, choices erased before taken. Each fragment tugged at Quill's mind. Some seduced with promise, infinite power, rewriting reality unchecked. Others threatened despair, dissolution of identity, erasure from existence. He felt panic rising. But then, he remembered the root story, the V. Isle, Alara's faith. He closed his eyes and focused. The ink light in his hand pulsed gently steady. He opened the journal, and the words he did not write flowed in his mind, forming coherent understanding. The Unwritten are not enemies. They are lost stories, seeking recognition. They are consequences, not malice. Quill opened his eyes. "You want to exist, to be acknowledged." A ripple passed through the Unwritten. Faces paused. Letters stilled. "Yes," the thin figure said, voice softer. "We seek space, not domination." Quill's pulse quickened. "Then we can work together. I can provide a narrative framework, not to bind you, but to allow you freedom." The Unwritten shifted. Shadows softened. The city trembled, but less violently. Reality seemed to breathe again. Alara exhaled, smiling faintly. "He's learning to read them, not fight them." Quill extended his hand, ink light flaring. "Together, we define possibility. Not by command, but by agreement." The Unwritten approached, letters solidifying into forms that were stable yet malleable. Slowly, they began to integrate into the city, not overriding, not controlling, but coexisting. The rain resumed its natural fall. Time smoothed. Buildings settled. The fissure in the clouds above still lingered, but now it felt like space to explore, not a threat. Quill held the journal to his chest. "The story continues," he murmured, "and this time, it will include everyone who wishes to be read." The thin figure, the first of the Unwritten, inclined its head. "Then let the author write, by reading, by understanding. Let the world truly remember itself." Quill exhaled, looking at the city, the new city, alive with free stories, but now aware of layers beyond him, realms beyond the root story. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he did not fear what might emerge. He had learned, writing was not control. Understanding was power. The journal glowed faintly. The Unwritten settled. The world waited, pulsing with infinite possibility. And Quill Hemlock, author and reader, took the first step toward learning what lay beyond the written and the read. The city hummed with cautious equilibrium. The Unwritten had settled, yet Quill could feel them always at the edges, potential stories, latent and alive, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be read. He walked beside Alara through streets that now seemed to shimmer subtly, edges soft, shifting as though reality itself breathed. "Do you feel it?" Alara asked. "The cracks aren't gone, they've just changed." Quill nodded. The fissure in the sky remained, a dark slit that pulsed faintly like the heartbeat of something immense. But now it wasn't threatening, it was curious. The world was still incomplete, but alive with possibility. Vale appeared beside them, notebook tucked under his arm. "The stabilization is temporary," he said, eyes scanning the horizon. "The Unwritten will not settle completely unless they are understood. They are fragments of stories that should exist. They are memory given form. And there are still layers deeper than even the veil." Quill tightened his grip on the journal. "Layers? How deep?" Vale's eyes darkened. "Deeper than most authors have dared to read. Beyond root story. Beyond veil. Realms where narrative itself becomes conscious, where story and reality are inseparable. A single misstep there, and even an author may vanish entirely." Alara's gaze fixed on the fissure above. "Then that's where we go next." Quill hesitated. The journey into the veil had tested him beyond imagination, but the realm beyond promised something far more dangerous, a place where even intention might not be safe. He opened the journal. The pages fluttered and glowed softly. Words formed, not written, not dictated, but suggested. "Beyond the fissure lies the realm beyond the veil. Stories without anchors wait there. To enter, you must surrender the certainty of your own narrative and become both observer and participant." Quill swallowed. Surrender certainty, become participant. I don't even know what that fully means. Vale nodded gravely. "It means the realm will challenge your assumptions, your choices, your sense of self. You may meet characters you never imagined, encounter events that refuse comprehension, and witness truths that cannot be fully articulated. Some may try to manipulate you. Some may try to erase you. But there is also understanding, perspective, freedom." Alara reached for his hand. "I'm not letting you do this alone." Quill squeezed her hand. "Neither will I go alone." Together, they stepped beneath the fissure. The air rippled, colors bending unnaturally. Reality seemed to fold in on itself as if every building, every street, every raindrop of the city were being refracted through invisible lenses. They passed through the slit and felt reality compress and expand simultaneously, as though they were traveling through a story's spine, bending time and space like paper folded to reveal hidden illustrations. On the other side, they emerged into a vast, undulating landscape of ink and light, unlike anything they had ever seen. Mountains made of letters rose in impossible angles. Rivers flowed with liquid stories. Trees bore leaves inscribed with half-formed sentences. The air shimmered with fragments of forgotten narratives, faintly audible whispers of characters never finished, plots never resolved. The Unwritten moved freely here, no longer constrained by city streets or physical rules. They beckoned Quill and Alara forward, but always in motion, shape-shifting, teasing. Quill realized that every decision he made, every step he took, caused the landscape to reform subtly, responding to his attention and focus. A voice emerged from the heart of the realm, not distant, but inside Quill's mind, a resonance rather than speech. You have come far, Author Hemlock. You understand choice. You understand responsibility. But do you understand what it means to? Oh, witness the infinite. Quill's heart raced. I want to understand. I want to help. Then step fully into the realm. Do not cling to the written world. Do not hold the root story as crutch. Only then will you perceive the whole. The ground beneath him undulated. Quill felt a pull at his chest, a tug at the core of his identity. The journal pulsed, warm, insistent. He looked at Alara. Are you ready? She nodded. Always. Together. They stepped forward. Reality dissolved. Letters, sentences, and symbols enveloped them, wrapping around their bodies. Every instinct, every memory, every fragment of personality flickered like candlelight in wind. Quill felt himself fragmenting, yet simultaneously expanding. He was both everything and nothing, observer and participant, author and character. Images flashed before him, entire worlds forming and unforming, characters speaking in languages he almost understood, histories creating themselves anew. He realized the realm beyond did not obey time. It did not obey causality. It obeyed narrative potential, the raw energy of possibility itself. A figure appeared, vast, nebulous, a mass of ever-shifting ink and light. Not the entity from before, not a single presence, but something more primal. It moved through the realm as though swimming in the fabric of story itself. You have stabilized your world, it said, voice layered like countless echoes. You have freed the unwritten. But here, the laws of authorship are unformed. You will learn that to read a story is to participate in it. To witness is to alter. To exist is to create. Are you prepared? Quill closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of the realm through his veins, the ink light sinking with his heartbeat. I am prepared, he said firmly. I will learn. I will understand. I will read without controlling, witness without erasing, and participate without domination. The figure shimmered, stretching across the landscape. Then begin. Suddenly, the realm shifted again. A river of half-formed stories swirled around them, letters snapping into fleeting words. Friendship, betrayal, love, despair, courage, loss. Each fragment tried to attach to Quill's consciousness, to influence him, yet he moved through it, perceiving without claiming, witnessing without asserting. Alara followed closely, her hand brushing against his, anchoring him to a shared reality amidst the chaos of infinite possibility. Together, they walked deeper into the realm, exploring, listening, learning, and slowly, imperceptibly, beginning to weave stability from pure potential, not with authority, but with understanding. For the first time, Quill realized the truth of authorship in this place. It was not about writing, commanding, or defining. It was about presence, attention, and acknowledgement. Every being here, every story, every fragment of possibility needed recognition to exist fully. And somewhere far above, beyond even the shifting landscapes, the ancient entity had. But this time, it could not reach him. It could not dictate. It could only observe. And for the first time, Quill felt no fear. He was author and reader, participant and witness. Not master, not servant. The realm beyond stretched infinitely ahead. Every step forward promised discovery, challenge, and understanding. And Quill Hemlock, hand in hand with Alara, walked into it with unshakable resolve, ready to meet every unwritten story and infinite possibility, knowing that true narrative freedom had only just begun.